Welcome. My name is Natasha Sherman, and I am your host. As any of you know who watch my shows consistently, I am always looking to talk to people who reflect the amazing human spirit that has us come through challenges that seem unsurvivable and come out on the other end, not only surviving, but even thriving. And my guest today is one such person. He is Eugene Marsh. So Eugene grew up in the South. In 1965, he integrated an all-white school and even had a cross burned on his lawn. When he finished school, he joined the military and went to Vietnam and everything that entailed, including coming home with some medals, and found himself homeless. And then after that, his journey was consistently upward. So I want you to help me welcome Eugene Marsh.
Good afternoon, Tasha.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you for inviting me. Thank you again.
So, again, I always want to give people the experience of, as I said, the human spirit, because we all have it. And some people's stories are a little more dramatic than others, but there's something we can learn from every one of those stories.
Yes.
So I'm going to start with you back in the South. You grew up in a small town in South Carolina. And you were one of 13 foster children, yes?
Yes, in a town known as Lancaster, South Carolina, which is about 35 miles south of Charlotte, North Carolina.
So I'm assuming it was kind of a smallish town.
Very small. It was a very textile community.
Right.
Had its own infrastructure in terms of the families that grew there, and it was predominantly engaged in textile development in terms of resources, yes.
So you grew up in an era where you had to drink out of a separate fountain, use separate bathrooms. And I seem to remember this story where a young black boy had jumped over the fence of a swimming pool and jumped into the pool where white people were swimming, and they drained the pool.
And that was similar to what happened in South Carolina. African Americans were forbidden to use white facilities. We had separate swimming pools in Lancaster, separate facilities as far as bathrooms that could not be used by African Americans, could not drink from water fountains.
Now, some people, grow up in an atmosphere and it's just kind of, oh, that's the way it is. You may not like it, but that's kind of the way it is. Did it chafe even then? Did it feel somehow, God, there's something wrong with this?
Of course. Being that I was a very young man in the South, I didn't understand the dynamics of racism in terms of how it was embedded in the South. The Jim Crow laws were part of the culture in the South. I didn't understand, quote unquote, what those laws meant. But in detail, it came across as very vividly and very destructively how African Americans were treated.
Yeah. So then you decide to integrate an all-white school.
Yes.
The only African American walking into that school.
Yes.
How old were you?
I was 15. 15
what
years
was that like? Were you terrified? Were you
horrified? My concern was, and at that time, that my literate mother who raised me and my sisters and brothers had the fortitude, I had the idea that the only way that you can empower yourself was education, even though she could not read and write. But to have the idea that came to me at that time was to say, I wanted to find out what was I being denied that I could not integrate in all-white high school, why I could not study in a class with other students who were different than I. And that compounded me to say, what can I do differently, and why is it that I am forbidden to go to all-white high school?
What was that first day like?
Hell. To walk into.
I can't imagine, So I'm sure every eye, not only of the people you were in class with, but in the entire school, was on you.
Yes, to walk into Lancaster Senior High School in 1965, and not to have a welcome mat. Not to have teachers and principals stand there and saying, welcome to high school. It was a day of torment, the day of continued racism and bigotry. The N-word was constantly enunciated to me during classes and during between classes. So I was isolated. I felt I was isolated in the whole session.
What I want to ask you is, what had you go back a second day?
I went back because I mean there was no reverse to say I wanted to go. I wanted to change.
Yeah.
I went there for a purpose to get an education. I went there as to begin to open the envelope to see what was different between my high school as African American that I attended and the school that I wanted to integrate. And there was a difference in terms of education and the quality of education that white students were receiving versus African American students was receiving.
Did you make friends with anybody?
Eventually, yes. Eventually, but it was not easy.
Yes.
I mean, I don't think that all the students was embedded in racism. But I think that the culture of the South and the culture of my hometown overwhelmingly was embedded with racism because of the Jim Crow component of where racism was denoted, and that's why it was.
Did other people in the African American community say, "You must be nuts. Why are you doing that?"
Yes, they did. Yes, that was enunciated to me several times. That why would you want to go to an all-white high school when you could stay here in the black community? And my answer was that the fact that we were as young people, why could we not be integrated into high school? What was the reason that we wanted to stay separately and continue under the bigotry of racism in the South? So I chose to hear that, but I also took the opportunity to transform that for my own purpose and to turn what my own goal and future outlet was.
It takes a lot of fortitude, perseverance, unwillingness to give up, because as you and I talked before, a couple of other African American students did come to the school, but they couldn't take it and they left.
Right. The following year, students came to the high school, but decided that it was not right for them. So they chose to go back to the African American school that they attended, and rightfully so, because again there was not a welcome component of African Americans to integrate high school in '65 and '66.
And then the Ku Klux Klan burned a cross on your lawn?
Yeah, the Klan chose to burn a cross in my mother's yard during the first 6 weeks that I integrated the school to send a message to me and to the black community that they did not want me to attend their school. It was very troublesome. It was a terror within the fact that the cross was burned. And I stayed out of school for about 3 to 4 weeks until some calmness came.
This was a time when lynchings were common, so
African Americans was being lynched in South Carolina, and lynching did take place in South Carolina. I didn't think that I would be lynched, but it's just to have the cross burned, send a message that this is a part of the Jim Crow component of the South, which racism did deliver that message to me and to other African Americans that they wanted to keep the South the same, and so forth. Yes.
Did you get angry?
I did. Very angry. Tears came from my eyes. Frightened as to what my life would be. Tormented by the kids who rode the buses, who said things to me, who threw things at me. It made me feel less than a human.
Oh my God.
Because of the subtle conditions that were forced upon them to allow me to integrate to the school was not welcome at all.
And it's interesting because in a way they were the ones who were behaving in ways that were inhuman and less than. But they were brainwashed inside of their particular culture to perceive the world that way.
Yes.
I mean, it's horrific when you think of it.
And that in itself, Natasha, really began for me to look at myself as not being different, but being integrated into the system, which I thought we both could profit from, we both could learn from. But the stigma of ignorance and how it was embedded into the South, embedded into society, denoted how racism was and is to continue to be a part of their own culture.
Yeah. So I just want to ask one more question about going to school, because I'm thinking of the logistics. So did they have a separate bathroom for you?
No.
Where did you eat?
No separate bathroom, no separate facilities. The lunchroom was where I chose to sit, chose to eat. Bathroom was general boys and girls. I picked and choose when I went to the bathroom.
Yeah, I can
because
imagine.
I felt that my life could have been in danger by subjected racism or bigotry of young men who wanted to showcase their ability to reject me. It came about
Simply for wanting an education. Can you
yes,
believe that?
simply to want an education. But Natasha, I prevailed and I pursued my goals because I was not going to be deterred. I was not going to be rejected because I was there for a purpose, and that purpose was to acquire an education. Even though I graduated at the bottom of my class in 1967, I felt that I had accomplished a goal
Bravo.
by going to the high school
Bravo.
and graduating there in 1967. So during those 2 years, I cultivated an idea that education was to empower me, and
Yeah.
education was the outlet for me to achieve goals that I set for myself. And my foster mother, who really inspired me, motivated me, gave me the incentive that I
Good
could
for
do a better
her.
job, and that because of her, I succeeded in going to this particular high school.
Yeah.
Yes.
Good for her. So then you get out of high school and you join the military.
Yes, I left one plantation and joined another.
I love that. That's
was
kind of an
strictly-
apt description.
It was truly an opportunity for me to escape poverty, but realizing that not realizing that poverty was a part for me to escape, but the racism I could not escape, and that was a part of the military that I experienced as a veteran, and also as a Vietnam veteran.
So, and that's why you describe it as another plantation.
Another plantation, yes.
Yeah.
And in terms of coming young men like myself who came from the South into the military with other bigots and individuals who came from the South who brought that culture with them. In terms of the military, you couldn't
Sure.
separate that. So you were forced
Yeah.
to live with those conditions that was placed upon you.
And it's interesting, because I do know that there are other stories, and you and I met with my director, as a matter of fact, who was in Vietnam also. And his experience was that once you were in the jungles and on the battlefield, like rank disappeared, racism disappeared. It was all about survival. And as a matter of fact, I think one of his dear friends, who was an African American, was wounded, and it was a Klan member who dragged him off the field. So it also depends on where you end up as well.
Yes, and there were many conditions, Natasha, that were individuals on top of the Vietnam. There was racism embedded in Vietnam. There was race riots in Vietnam. There were conditions of rioting among whites and blacks based upon some of the conditions that we had to be exposed to. What I found out as a veteran in Vietnam is though we fought in the jungles of Vietnam, racism racism continued to be a part of the culture,
Sure.
even out in the fields.
Well, no
okay?
matter where you go, there you are, right?
So you have to be you have to be subjective, but you have to also be very careful because when you came under fire in the boonies and jungles of Vietnam, it's called cover your back, and we sometimes had to make sure that even though we were fighting the enemies, they would be subjected that maybe someone may want to take you out because there was a component of them retaliating against you and so forth.
It's hard to imagine, because it occurs to me, and I said this to you when we first talked, so you came back from Vietnam, and we're going to talk a little bit about that, but, with PTSD, but in my mind, you experienced PTSD from the time you entered that school.
Well, previous going to Vietnam, I mean, with the trauma and the terrorism that took place in the South,
On a daily basis.
that was constantly being under terror because of the environment of the Klan and of the culture of Jim Crow. And then going to the military to be exposed to a different layer where you thought that you was all in one, you all had green uniforms on, that you all treated separately, you was all treated in the same process. That was not the case. And then to come back from Vietnam as a homeless veteran with poor, black, and uneducated, couldn't find a job. No one would hire me because of the stigma that's associated with the Vietnam War, and especially being African American. That was a double conditions of being recognized for being a Vietnam veteran.
Wow, that's a rough road.
Very much so. But again, but the concern that I have was to take those opportunities as skill sets that I learned to survive in Vietnam and apply them to my life as a civilian.
So what were some of those things?
never retreating, beginning to realize that you have, even though you have limitations, there are other options that were presented to you. And I wanted to expose my condition as to what I had learned as a young African American in South Carolina. But more important is the fact that I thought and still feel that I had a purpose in life. And I was driven to those points that I wanted to begin to search out what my future could be, possibly be, and what was the resources I needed to build myself upon those.
You know what I think is so significant in what you just said, and you've used this word a couple of times, and as a coach, I work with people to kind of define their purpose, even if it's only for a short time, and you always had a purpose. And you were very clear that whatever you were doing and whatever injustices you were suffering, your purpose was in the foreground.
Yes, I never allowed anyone or anything to prohibit me or to tell me what I could not do, or to begin to say or begin to think has a different alternative purpose. I always felt that I had a deep-rooted passion of giving myself and back to my community. I always felt that it was my duty to do so because of my own upbringing as a young African American in South Carolina. But most important, the wheel that I looked for was the education component to help develop me personally and professionally, and that in itself revealed to me opportunities that I never knew that existed.
And you never gave up seeing the possibility of opportunities, even if they weren't right in front of you at the time.
I've always been searching. I'm always looking for an opportunity to excel. Always looking for opportunity to learn from others that can expose me to opportunities that they have, and how could I achieve them as well.
So I'm going to ask you a question, then I want to move on, because you then, did some amazing things to build up your entire life. But is there something that you've learned in this process that you would say to that young man that you were, that might have helped him then?
That's an excellent question, Natasha. For me, is to begin to look at my internal values and to assess them as to where I was at that time and what was the conditions that my life was molded by the nature and the nurture of those entities that came to me. And if I had to look back at my life today, it would be the values that I acquired as a young man, unknown those conditions, what they were, but what they meant, and how I continue to excel in those values that I think has resonated with me today. And being thinking positive, just being very forceful to say, I'm not going to turn back and I'm not going to reject any opportunities that may come to me, because everything has a reason, has a purpose in life.
Yeah. And you already operated that way, but it would have been nice to have someone like, a little angel tapping on your shoulder and say, keep on keeping on.
And that was a role. And again, not understanding what role models were, but there was a very few role models in my life. But to have someone to tap me on the shoulder and say, this is what you can become if you stay focused. Do the following things. That would be the essence of you achieving your goals.
Yeah.
But I think that I pull those items together because of my own journey of traveling throughout life and listening and observing and hearing other people. That kind of began to put the pieces together, and I began to connect those dots together in terms of what my what opportunities were.
And I think that's advice you could give to anyone if you are mentoring. Listen, learn, connect the dots, and put it into practice.
Yes.
So now you're living in the streets. You've come back from Vietnam.
Homeless Vietnam veteran, 1970. 2.5 years. Lived in a transit of unable to find employment. Had a very limited education. I was reading and writing on the 5th or 6th grade level. I had a speech impediment. Was unable to communicate. Just felt that I was inadequate as a young man who served my country and as patriotic as anyone could and should. And to come back and be rejected in society.
Once again.
Yeah, once again. And so that line of being homeless or being in transition caused me to rethink what was my purpose and how could I elevate myself from the conditions that I was in, and what was the intentions of what I wanted to become. So, again, gravitating to the fact that jobs were very limited. Employment was opening up with a utility company known as Duke Power Company in Charlotte, North Carolina. At that time, they called a program called Affirmative Action Program, which was a part to attract African Americans and minorities into the industry. And so that was my first opportunity to be employed in the construction industry, and that in itself led to opportunities for me to become a design engineer and worked for various construction companies and engineering companies. But again, I continue to strive for education, because those skill sets that I needed, I did not have, but I went after those skill sets in a community college to learn to do drafting, mechanical drafting, engineering, because that's what I felt that could help me excel into corporate America.
That's pretty impressive. And then you ended up in this area of the country, and you had your own construction company for a lot of years. Yes.
Worked for several major construction companies, and then 1998 I found and formed my own construction management company, and Out of the Box was my first construction project, which was the Merrill Lynch headquarters project in Hopewell Township. That in itself was the surprise that one would say, to land a multi-million-dollar contract working for Merrill Lynch as their consultant.
What did that feel like?
That was awesome.
Yeah.
That was an experience of just coming from North Carolina to New Jersey, working in New York, and then starting my own construction company. It just sent shockwaves.
Yeah, I can imagine.
It sent shockwaves to the community and nationally, that here I am as African American has been selected. But it also goes back to the principles that I adopted as to my values, and what was the values, and steadfast to what my company goals were and could accomplish, and never deviating from my ethics and so forth.
So what would you say were your values?
Honesty, integrity, being forthright, never telling a lie, saying something you can do, what you can't do, and being focused on what you could contribute to the company's goal to order to be successful. And opportunities, Natasha, begin to open up with my company, working with Merrill Lynch on the headquarters project in Hopewell Township, being featured in Black Enterprise magazine, and moving fast forward. The last project, which my firm was the construction manager, was the Statue of Liberty project.
Wow, from that kid in South Carolina.
In South Carolina, yeah.
With a cross burning on his lawn.
Yeah, and that same young man who was denied and rejected because of the color of his skin now was sitting in the audience with construction companies, the top 10 construction companies, discussing issues and pre-construction, how to renovate and how to manage construction projects.
Wow. So now you're still in school, right? You got your bachelor's, and now you're getting your master's in mental health?
I received my bachelor's degree in 2014.
And you gave the commencement speech?
I was the commencement speaker at Value University.
Wow. And one of the things that I wanted to, there's something you belong to on one of the committees. I'm on
several boards. I'm on the Mid-Jersey Chamber of Commerce board, the board of directors. I'm also a member of the Trenton Public Education Foundation. And
what about the Supreme Court Yes, New Jersey Supreme Court. You are on the Ethics Committee?
Ethics Committee. I was appointed to the New Jersey Supreme Court Ethics Committee in 2015. Let me just give you a quick background about that.
Yeah.
That came out of left field, right field. This came to me out of nowhere. That I received a phone call from one of the principals of a law firm who contacted me and basically said to me, Eugene, you have been recommended, or your name has come to me as a possible, to submit your name as a possible nominee. And I was just totally flattered. I was totally gassed. I said, who are you? And he said who he was, and I met with him. And that was in the spring of 2015, and 6 months later, I got the confirmation that I had been appointed to the New Jersey Supreme Court Ethics Committee. And it's a 4-year term, and I'm very honored and very humble that opportunity such as that has been offered to me. I always tell my friends, it's not who you see, but who sees you. And what is that? What is your life expand? What is that you're doing outside the doors of your home that people recognize your accomplishments, your ethics, your integrity, your values, what those
And you're
components.
consistently involved in contributing to the community.
Giving back is always is a part of which I think is a part ingrained in my DNA is to help uplift our young people, especially our young men and women in the minority community, to give them tools and resources that they will be better and to be better and productive citizens. It is a part of who I am and what I have become, and it's a mirror of what I have been given to be successful, and I think it's nothing less than to help those young men and women who are trying to escape poverty and the other conditions in the community, to give them the tools.
So we need to see people like you, and young people need to see people like you, and they need to hear your story, because I think what happens is there's a sense of hopelessness for a lot of people who haven't got clear purposefulness or meeting some challenges. And there's also a sense of what can one person do? Well, you're a pure example of what one person can do. And where you came from and where you are now and where you will continue to go is nothing short of miraculous.
Well, I consider this as an opportunity, because this is truly a gateway for me. I never imagined that I would ever go to college. There was never planted the idea that Eugene Marsh would walk across the stage and receive his degree. And not only that, but be welcome at an institution of higher learning to be a part of the fabric of the university where I'm excelling in areas I never thought I would do. And now I'm pursuing my master's in clinical mental health. Is really a program that I'm very passionate about, and also it gives me an opportunity to work with young men and women who are in the military and those who have returned home.
It's about giving back.
Yes.
Eugene, we are unfortunately at the end of our time. I'm so happy that you were willing to come and share your story.
Thank you for inviting me.
I'm happy for what you're doing out in the world, and I look forward to hearing more about everything you're going to accomplish.
Thank you, Natasha. I look forward to speaking with you as well.
Absolutely. My name is Natasha Sherman. Thank you for joining us.